Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering in Houston where we, around craft beer, talk about theology and philosophy and maybe a little politics and ethics and all kinds of interesting things. But this particular version of Theology on Air is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology that looks at Christian news and events through a Christian worldview. I like to say that this is blessed talk, not happy talk. So, and I always try to say that differently every time so Sarah can't mouth the words like I'm so predictable or something. Anyway, on this show, we look at substantial, serious issues going on in the world right now. And this week, we want to try to be especially positive or white pilly-ish because it's
as opposed to every other white pill radio.
Yes.
We're not going to be a downer this time,
well,
guys.
I know that I'm supposed to be more positive than I am on this particular show. And so I'm going to try extra hard to be extra positive. But anyway, I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. And with me, as always, is the Grand Poobah of Theology by the Pint.
Hey, guys. Sarah Stone, Executive Director.
And where can people learn more about Theology by the Pint? I can't remember.
I'm so glad you asked. Oh, my gosh. theologybythepint.org. Everything
Awesome.
you need to know. And as we're coming into the end of year, Giving Tuesday coming up, consider giving.
Definitely consider it.
Don't just consider, do it.
Also do it. Yes. Okay. Okay, and this side of the table, they have their own cam. I'm going to hit the button so that people can see. Oh, it's the Mason Oscar cam. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. Mace.
So, Oscar, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me back. Feels like it's been
a long time.
few
A while.
months, maybe
It's been a while.
close to a year, couldn't say. But I'm Oscar Villanova. I teach here in Houston. I teach practical theology to seniors, and I'm also the Bible department chair there at that school.
School, which
But he
will
won't say
not
the
be
name,
named.
just
All
in case he says something they don't like.
Okay, good deal.
Wonderful. Hey guys, I'm Mace Perez. I'm a church planner and one of the pastors at the Journey Church Houston, a new church in the Heights. You can find us at thejourneyhouston.org.
All right, and he wins the award for the lowest voice.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yes. If I call someone, they might think I'm a woman. You know what I mean? Like it happens. It has happened.
Well, in
before, actually.
2024, any voice can be a woman.
That is true. That is true. Okay. Well, since it is Thanksgiving week, and maybe we'll release this on Thanksgiving Day, so people can be listening to your
While they're
voices.
chopping onions and
Yes.
celery. I love it.
Yes, or roasting turkeys or whatever it is that they do. I wanted to take a minute just to ask maybe an abstract question, which is Thanksgiving a uniquely Christian holiday? And I want to answer yes to that because any other answer would be boring and useless, right?
Well, moving on. No.
So Thanksgiving is a uniquely Christian holiday. Let me make my case, and then
Okay.
I want you guys to chime in. So I just copied and pasted this straight from an article from Hanford Sentinel, which is a local newspaper, I think, in like Washington State or something. But it was a good article, and he did all the dirty work for me of like looking up how many times the word Eucharisto, which is the Greek word for Thanksgiving, is used in the New Testament and stuff like that. So let me just read what he has to say. Several Greek and Hebrew words are translated thanks and thanksgiving in the Bible, but here are the big two. In Hebrew, it's yod. I think that's how that's said. This is the main word for thanks in the Old Testament. The concept of thanks comes up 102 times, and this word is used 72 of those times. So that's a fair amount, 100 times, you know. I mean, the Old Testament's a big book. Acknowledging what is right about God and praise and thanksgiving, 1 Chronicles 16:34, can also mean a right acknowledgement of self before God and confessing sin. In the Greek, as I mentioned, the word Eucharisto, of course we get the word Eucharist, the Lord's Supper from that. Thankfulness comes up 71 times in the New Testament, and most of those instances are the word Eucharisto or related to this word. So 71 is like a lot in a much smaller book. So that's sort of interesting that as the Christian message is promulgated, the idea of giving thanks is more and more. Also interesting is that the New Testament context is much more difficult than the Old Testament context because Christians were, persecuted. I mean, Paul is writing from prison, give thanks unto all things. Hey, I'm thankful that they put me in jail so I could proselytize the guys, the guards and whatnot. So Peter has this expression of, in this whole atmosphere, you might say, this whole motif of giving thanks in all things, even though the circumstances are often terrible for what we would call New Testament Christians. You know what I'm saying? Okay. But I want to say quickly why I think it's uniquely Christian, in addition to the fact that you see it so much in our holy writings. So also to give thanks, you need a person to whom thanks can be given.
That's right. Yeah.
So giving thanks is therefore personal. I mean, you can't give thanks to an energy, like in Star Wars. We can't give thanks to the Force. I don't think. Can you? Do they do it? No. Anyway, so God must be personal. That's a given, right? Okay. To give thanks means that things could have gone another way, right? So you give that when you're giving thanks to God, you're saying, well, that turned out well. Thank you. Or it turned out better than it could have. And so then that also means that God is active in the world. So there's no reason to give thanks if God is a deist. Now, I know that all of the founding fathers were deist. Not really.
Yes.
/S.
yeah.
Sarcasm.
Yeah. So
/S.
is that what that means?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
At the end of any post, if you see /S.
Oh, well,
Sarcasm.
I need to start using that more often.
We're learning so much.
So anyway, so I think there are probably more reasons I could give, but I did kind of do a quick survey in my mind of global religions, and I'm thinking, can Buddhists give thanks? Well, they don't really believe in God. They certainly don't believe in a personal, involved God like we do, right? So, yeah. So Hindu, I don't know that you can give thanks to. I guess you could give thanks to any one semi or demigod in a pagan or polytheistic religion. But really, in all these cases, you have battling gods, who are fighting for each other for supremacy.
Not to mention, whatever those gods give you is in response to some work that you did or proper sacrifice that you
So it kind of
made.
could come back to yourself. Thanks, me, for doing things the right way that earned their favor.
I don't know if in Islam, I mean, obviously, as I just said, in the Old Testament, there are many expressions of giving thanks. So within Judaism, there should be a culture of giving thanks. And the only other monotheistic religion is Islam. And I don't think they're opposed to giving thanks. But the question then would be, is Thanksgiving as a kind of, not a forced, but a recognized kind of way of life or something that ought to be done, is it uniquely Christian? I think that I could make the case that it is. Of course, we have so much to be thankful for. Because of what God has done for us by becoming flesh and dying on the cross and offering us the forgiveness of sins and everlasting life.
You keep using the term giving thanks or Thanksgiving, which is interesting because I think like in our zeitgeist, the word that gets tossed around is gratitude. They're synonymous, except gratitude is this thing, this sort of like concept that people ought to have this like attitude of gratitude. You have to, wake up and do a gratitude and, have an intention of gratitude or a posture of gratitude, but it almost becomes its own sort of cyclical thing, like gratitude for or to what, for the good things, but to what? I think that's kind of gotten lost. Yeah. So when you use the language give thanks, well, then you have this idea that the thanks is going somewhere. It's lifting upward, hopefully, to the creator and sustainer.
Yeah.
You seem to be describing more of a mentality, a disposition, and when you say attitude, like it's something that can be self-contained. Yeah. If I just decide to express myself in a thankful way, then that's accomplishing something, but it's not acknowledging that the gift came from somewhere.
Yeah. And people keep journals, like gratitude journals. In fact, there was a episode of I won't say what show because it's trashy and I probably shouldn't have been watching it, but they make a joke about every self-help book is about two things. I don't remember what the first one was, but the second was gratitude. Every self-help book is like, if you want your life to be better, be grateful. But, and so people will keep journals of things like, woke up this morning, sunny day, great phone call with my sister, whatever. But again, those are just, it's like thinking about good things in your life is not the same as gratitude. Acknowledgement is not the same as giving thanks.
Right. And the other thing, it reminds me of when we were talking about abortion, right? And someone says, well, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. Well, it's literally a synonym for a baby.
Yeah.
We're just appealing to the Latin. Same thing with gratitude. It comes from the Latin word for thankfulness. So they're literally the same word. And I imagine that someone who would not claim to be a theist, they're saying, well, how can you invalidate this feeling that I get? Like I do my gratitude journal and I have this legitimate feeling of thankfulness or gratitude, even if I don't consciously have a personal being that I'm giving thanks to. And my mind went to, I think it's similar to Romans 1. Evan will probably appreciate this as someone who leans more towards presuppositional apologetics. That's and broadly in presuppositional apologetics, we would say there's no true atheist, right? We just suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And I think something similar is going on right there. I think that general experience of gratitude is an evidence of common grace. Whether people consciously realize that they're thankful to God, they are. And it's interesting. We often will cite Romans 1 and we'll say the unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Well, what does Paul say just a couple verses later in Romans 1:21? He says, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him.
Huh. Ooh, mace. That's a good word.
Yeah.
I mean, you pulled it straight from Paul, so it's really his,
Exactly.
but you know, that's good.
Yeah.
Makes me think when we're all going around the table on Thanksgiving saying, what are you grateful for? It might be, especially if you have non-believers at your table, it might be a nice little nudge just to ask people to consider where all those gifts come from.
Yeah. Yeah, they do have to come from somewhere if you're giving thanks to somebody or something.
James makes the assertion that every good and perfect gift
Yep.
comes from above, from the Father of lights, with whom there's no shadow or variance. And as I thought about that right before saying it, I keep thinking about how someone could quibble about good and perfect. Like, God didn't give me good and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But, thinking back to discussions I've had with students about, like, why do we pray? Why do we ask for anything? If God already knows and he's not giving me what I want, like, why do we pray? And a response that I've had is you actually would pray for what God gives you if you knew what God knows. And in that sense, what happens is the good and perfect thing if you are a child of God and he's working all things out for your good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Man, this is so inspiring.
Some pearls of wisdom over here. The whether how unique it is to America in terms of a holiday. I've tried to read over through the years. I'm always like, what do we celebrate this for? And there's conflicts about the Wampanoag relationship with the settlers and how they shared things and didn't have one meal, but shared resources and things. But the first instituted Thanksgiving was by George Washington after the Battle of Saratoga, I believe, and then at the conclusion of the American Revolution. And that was when the fourth Thursday of November was assigned, and then with the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln did it. I don't know if it was a tradition that had fallen out of favor, or if Washington didn't say to do it every year. He just said to do it these 2 times, and then it became a tradition. But I do think there's something to be said for when good things happen, you give thanks to God. Instead of just being like, well, I'm glad that happened, but actually saying God is the cause of this thing, and therefore we live in his world by his debt and by his favor. So,
and hopefully we're doing that every time we come to the table, right? The communion table, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, which I was in my 40s before I realized that that's what that meant. Like that it meant thankfulness, Thanksgiving, which is pretty cool. So I don't know, it's such a mysterious thing, but it can be so simple in that moment just to give thanks for everything that God has done for you.
Well,
namely
the portion of the liturgy that begins the Lord's Supper is called the Great Thanksgiving.
Yep.
The Lord be with you and also with you. Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up into the Lord. It is right to give thanks and praise.
Yeah. So she's liturgical now. So 2 years ago, she wouldn't have been saying that.
I would have been because the first church I went to in Houston also did that.
Oh, okay.
Presbyterians can do it too.
But I would argue it's right. It's built right into the liturgy, in terms of the word itself. So there's that. But okay, well, that's what Thanksgiving is. So happy Thanksgiving, and
if you're celebrating and you're not a Christian, you're doing it wrong.
That's right. you don't get to.
But you can be a Christian.
Moral of the story.
You can be a Christian. That's the really good news.
But this wouldn't be a White Pill Radio episode if we
didn't talk about weird stuff going on in the world.
Exactly.
That's our segue.
Yeah.
Well, when Evan said we were going to do this thing where we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving, I thought about something that there's a movement happening that a lot of people think is going to make a difference, and a lot of conservatives are saying, sounds good. Great. I'm thankful for that. And it is the 4B movement. I don't know how big this is, but it's fun to talk about. This was started in South Korea, I guess a little while ago. It's a sort of a feminist movement. The 4Bs, they're Korean words, but they mean, if I can remember, no marriage, no sex, no dating, no
children,
childbearing, no giving birth, which I think is funny. They have to include giving birth. Like if there's no sex, I feel like that one's covered, but whatever. So it's women that to sort of fight the patriarchy and to say they're done with all of the crazy conservative traditional stuff that's going on. This is how they're going to react and stick it to the world. And it's picked up some speed here in America after around the time that Trump won. It was like, well, this is how we're going to respond. Is we're going to stop. It's not just
until
no
they
sex.
get their rights back.
Yes. There's not just no sex.
Whatever
it's
rights
no meaningless sex. like no one night stands, no sex with people I don't love. And of course, then the response is like, what a wonderful idea that's been around for all of time until
your terms are acceptable.
Your terms are acceptable.
Yeah.
But also the kind of women that are saying, you know what, let me not say that. Let me just stay positive and say something that was, born to be sort of a rebellion is actually doing a very good thing. Not that people aren't seeking out companionship. I mean, that's sad and they should be. But that the people that are grumpy and bitter about everything aren't, adding children into the world and are not having meaningless sex and getting STDs and having,
abortions,
unwanted children that then they're, is great news. So I am thankful for something that is supposed to be, a movement of revolt.
Well, I guess give a little bit of credit where credit is due. They would see themselves as an offshoot of the Me Too movement. That the South Korean movement, as it originated, was specifically a revolt against unrighteous, immoral, unethical, oppressive treatment of men towards women. And I think as Christians, like, we can acknowledge that I'm not going to accept every claim of oppression or that patriarchy or whatever is inherently evil. But I think as Christians, we actually have more resources to be able to call a spade and look at actions and actually to stand up for justice. We have an objective basis for morality. If something were to happen in my church, we have means of church discipline. And then we, of course, believe that the government is a minister of God meant to institute justice and to punish evildoers. So I want to give credit where credit is due on that. A couple of things that I find interesting about the origins of the movement. So it originated in South Korea, as you mentioned, which South Korea, I believe, has the lowest birth rate in the world, if not one of.
It says it.
Or 0.7.
And so
this, right here,
this is only going to exacerbate that problem.
And the political divide between men and women is the furthest in South Korea than anywhere in the world. So,
I also find
we actually saw a bridging of that gap in America this election.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is good.
I also find it interesting that critics, non-conservative critics of the movement, have criticized it for being transphobic and homophobic and for perpetuating a gender binary, which I find interesting. And just humorously, just kind of picking up on what you said of one of the things that is good from a conservative Christian standpoint is okay, well, then that's less children being raised up in these secular and pagan ideologies. And it made me think, in our own church, we have one of our pastors, Stephen, his wife is about to have a baby just about any day now, hopefully not too soon. We have another woman in our congregation that's pregnant. And so, the joke around the journey is that these women in the journey are doing everything they can to help this young church plant grow.
That's cute.
So it's so let's raise more conservative, Bible-believing Christians and have less being raised in homes that
there
are
was
anti-Christ.
a running joke on the Wall Street Journal used to have a Best of the Web page. I don't even know if they still have it anymore, but it was kind of an early blog. And they would constantly, thank you, they would constantly be talking about the way that abortion has essentially taken a lot of the fangs out of the liberal movement in America, because people getting abortions are not all, but mostly liberal, and they're killing their own children. So because children are more likely to be like their parents. So if you figure there's been 60 million abortions and you figure conservatively 35 million of those would have been more left-leaning than not, then that's a 10 million human being swing, toward one political view or the other. So in every way, I mean, I said this at the event we had, who are you going to vote for? I mean, in so many ways, the left is essentially anti-life.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
It's anti-life in that it's not for procreation, because the left doesn't really, not to a person, but as a movement, it doesn't celebrate the family. It has abortion as a top priority. Homosexuality is not procreative. Trans is,
I don't know,
chopping.
It says right in here, trans girls, lock it up. So trans girls can apparently.
Yeah. Well,
just saying what the article is saying.
I mean, the sexual revolution. The good news is that the sexual revolution is, as it always was, meant to be an abject failure. It doesn't work. You do see the rise of huge amounts of STDs or STIs or whatever we call them these days.
Yeah.
You see fewer people having children. You see people delaying marriage. You see a lot of unhappiness. The dating apps don't really work. That hasn't solved really the problem. What God has instituted, to speak the obvious here, but is that, yes, sex is a good thing. Have it within the confines of marriage. God made male and female for each other. It's pretty simple. Procreate, have kids. They bring you joy. All of that. So now that the society is sort of breaking and fraying and like barely being held together, and the only thing that sort of allowed it to work at all was abortion, right? Because in their worldview, right?
Yeah.
Was because that solved the problem of an unwanted pregnancy. And if that is starting to get peeled back some, maybe a little, I'm not sure that it is, but if it is, and these women are doing what they should be doing in the first place,
right?
Like you said, your terms are acceptable to doing the very thing that you ought to be doing, which is protecting yourself, protecting your body, your holiness, your
virtue,
and for the sake of living for others, primarily for your children, but for the one man, who you will commit to. It's pretty simple. So nature is healing, has a way of working itself out, and I don't know how long this will last, but hopefully not long.
Well, along those same lines, I'm thankful that like theology and teleology just always shows up, like that which is in accordance to reality and created order. And
what does telos mean, Oscar?
I feel like that's a running bit on this program, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But the design for which something was made, indeed created by God to work, and how it would, and conservative values, tradition. Like this is what these ladies claim to be protesting. And so I'm thankful that it's bearing out the results that are sort of always laid out. But on the other side, or the flip side of that coin, my heart kind of breaks for them, because in their protests, they are denying themselves, or at least endeavoring to deny themselves, of the very thing that they were created for, which was to be in union, which was to be in an exclusive union that's going to, help flourishing within the union, ultimately, hopefully within children. And I can't imagine that these women are more happy for being more lonely. I can't imagine that they are more fulfilled in their isolation. I think we're built for relationship. I think that's just always been the case. In the same way it's not good for a man to be alone, I don't think it's good for women to be alone. And so that they see somehow their protest as like sticking it to the man, like I think it just continues to affirm that there's a deep longing and a deep yearning, and that they were looking for it in these one night stands, that they were hoping to fill that void in these meaningless relationships, this meaningless sex. And I think it really will backfire tremendously. Will they admit it? How long will it take? I guess we're going to see, but sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I will say I am sympathetic to, like, because a lot of this came to the fore where they're taking videos of shaving their heads and things like that. And a lot of them are saying, I'm not going to be pretty for anyone else. Mm-hmm. Okay. I actually am somewhat sympathetic that it is sad that they feel that they have to do all of this to have some sort of level of attractiveness for men. I don't actually, no, I'm not opposed to.
You mean two men? Attractive two men? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So like, I'm aware of the fact that when we're dating and courting, like men and women should present themselves in a good light to be a good mate. That's like normal. But like there should come a time in your life where it's like, I don't have to look my best today because you're in that committed relationship. So
let it go.
Yes.
Well, let it all go.
I mean, maybe not let it go. I think out of respect for our spouse, we still, get our hair cut and, I don't know.
Try.
Lift some weights or something or whatever it is that we do. But I will say it is sad that they are going through life like, I only do this to be pretty. That's sad. Like, I don't think God actually wants us to live that way forever. I think there's a time in our life where you're the one woman here, so maybe you can tell me I'm wrong. But it's like, I think it's, you shouldn't have to go through life, think your whole life, and be in your 40s or something, and be like, I'm going to shave my head because I don't care if anyone thinks I'm pretty anymore. Like, they should have some freedom at some point in their life where it's like, I don't have to live that way.
Well, yeah, but I think, I don't know, maybe this isn't fully formed. I think that's conflating two different things. It's the being pretty for who and why would you want to be pretty, but also like shaving your head it's
pretty
taking
radical.
It's not just about like pretty and ugly. It's also about taking away something that's like feminine.
Yeah.
It's taking away the girliness, the femininity from yourself. Like, what better way? Like, stop wearing lipstick and then what? Cut your hair, because in our modern society, long hair. And don't come for me. People are like, well, that's a cultural thing and it was different in Bible times.
And why does every trans woman have long hair?
Right.
Okay,
and sometimes a beard, but you know.
Also, the scripture does call a woman's hair her glory.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
What do you think of
I'm just best possible light here, with the, I think it is a sad movement, like you were saying. So,
but just so you know, I don't agree that once you get married, you can shave your head.
Okay.
Because that's what I heard you say for sure.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I would hope that most women, by the time they're in their, throw out a number, mid-20s, would have some freedom in their life where they have a man who loves them, and they don't have to live in a way.
Try 100% all the time. But yeah.
Yes. Because like
sure.
that's actually...
It's exhausting.
That would be exhausting and not very freeing. And so the choices that they've made, though, are that for whatever reason, a lot of them have ended up single, and they are on that rat race to constantly please men. And what we're saying as Christians is there's a better way.
Yeah.
Like you can leave the rat race if you are willing to commit to a man, but the kind of man that you probably want is probably a conservative man that you hate. Because, like the man who's going to commit himself to you is probably a man with conservative principles. And you reject that out of hand because you prize abortion or whatever it may be. So the worldviews have to get aligned. But like I said, in America, if the elections are any indication, we're close, like men and women are actually getting closer. Whereas in South Korea, they went further
apart. Look at you white pilling all over the place.
There you go. One final thought, and this will probably be a theme for me, that what part of my white pill is just, here again, I think we see unintentionally evidence of God's common grace shining through.
You said that term twice, not to be that girl, but what?
Sure,
what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I did it to Oscar, so you can do it to me. So, common
Oscar
grace
was in the middle of explaining his when you asked him,
right?
But you did not. So.
Well, I didn't make my point yet either. But common grace is basically God is good and gracious to all, not just Christians, but the righteous and the unrighteous. And so, and one of the ways we see that is that even non-believers can stumble upon truth, whether or not they intend to or not. And so I don't remember if it was an article that you sent or it was another one I saw, but there was one of the ladies being interviewed in an article about this 4B movement, and she said, I still want to have a child someday. It's just not going to be with a man.
Oh.
And
you scratched your head.
I was like, literally, regardless, and leaving the debate about IVF or surrogacy or whatever to the side, come to the whatever.
January 14th.
There you go. Just the fact, no matter in any of those equations, a man is still required. So.
Yes. Oh, bless. That's just like simple biology. I don't know how to segue that. Well, there's a man and a woman involved in your Volvo ad.
Yeah, maybe that's and again, I think that's going to be kind of my white pill. So Jaguar, the car company who has been struggling in recent years, came out with a recent rebrand, and the initial ad campaign features a number of people that are clearly meant to represent a wide range of so-called gender identities. And the tagline of this ad campaign is "Copy Nothing." And in response to this, Volvo, there's a Volvo ad that actually came out a couple months ago, but has recently become viral. And it's a 4-minute long ad.
It's like a little movie.
Like it breaks like so many advertising rules, but it's like a little mini movie. And basically the premise of this ad is you see this young couple, and the woman tells the man that she's pregnant, and then he's on the phone with one of their parents. I don't remember.
It's his mom.
His mom. And he's just talking about it. And then that gets interspersed with all these clips of watching this young girl like growing up throughout the years and raising this daughter. And then occasionally you see clips of this woman walking across the street and this other woman driving the car. And kind of the climax of this ad is the driver of the vehicle, which is a Volvo.
Which they've made you think at the beginning is the grandma, by the way. They shoot it. The lady's blonde, and so it almost looks like gray hair. So you think it's the lady maybe coming to their house or something.
Yeah. You don't really know what's going on,
there's
right?
Like a time play happening. Yeah.
Well, the climax is this lady's not paying attention, and she's about to hit the woman that is pregnant, and then the safety features in the vehicle stop the car, and the whole like base point of the ad is like what would have happened if it weren't for these.
Because you've seen the whole life of this child play out, and that would not have happened if.
Exactly right. And so
I gasped audibly, like it got me, and then
So I chuckled when you made a comment earlier. I figured I'd save it for the podcast. So I am not known for being a particularly like emotionally expressive person.
Oh my gosh, there's 3 of you in the room.
And I do not cry very often. I don't have any philosophical opposition to crying. That's just not that often.
We can unpack that later.
That something moves me.
I have a philosophical opposition
to tears. Well, this was like one of those rare times, like where I was moved to tears by the end, especially as like a dad of a daughter.
Yeah.
And, so it definitely hit me in the feels. But again, to me, here's an example. I think the right pill whites itself. I don't know if I've seen a more positively, emotionally compelling pro-life, pro-family, anything in quite a long time. And so I'm not saying that the makers of Volvo or the makers of that ad are necessarily like conservative Christians. I'm sure they're probably not. But here again, I think we see God's common grace at work. And there's this clear movement where people are responding positively to this ad that is upholding like the beauty of family and procreation, and have this instinctual revulsion to this ad that is trying to go basically entirely against God's created order.
Well, and the Jaguar ad wasn't just, it was gender bending. It's also like very like sort of harsh optically. I mean, there's like bright colors, and then the background's all like black and gray. There's no car in the whole thing. Yeah. And
it's like the Hunger Games characters, jumped out of the movie.
But it's also grammatically like really jarring. Like I realize that sounds so dorky because I'm the one that's always like correcting people, but they'll say like a verb with like where it's supposed to be an adverb, but it's used as a noun. Like the whole thing it's just jarring in every way. It's meant to be. I think that's part of the aesthetic they're going for. I don't think it's by accident. And so you have this jarring thing that doesn't talk about the car and is meant to sort of be almost like an art piece, even if you're okay with the woke stuff. And then to contrast it with this thing, which talks about the car, but not just the car, but the way that the car will make your life better and save lives is... Yeah, it's a really, really interesting contrast.
Wasn't there a Coca-Cola ad in like Brazil or something recently that was really family friendly, and like the woman revealed she was pregnant?
I don't know. I don't watch a lot of international.
I'll look that up.
I don't watch many Brazilian Coca-Cola commercials.
Well, no, I mean it was.
No, I vaguely remember what you're talking about, but I don't remember it clearly enough.
It went viral for the same reason, because people were like, "Oh, finally, a family-friendly, company that's celebrating life instead of the darkness that." But the thing about the Jaguar is, they only sold like 70,000 cars last year. That's pretty shocking. 70,000. That's like nothing. I mean, Jaguar used to be one of the great, aspirational kind of cars on earth. But the tagline of "copy nothing," it's so like everything about that offends me. It's the whole ad is copying just avant-garde styles for the last 50 years. I mean, it's just people with weird colored shirts and stupid hairdos and bad makeup.
Turning their head at the end.
Like it's nothing. It's like Sprockets, the old SNL skit. I do not know. This is the time when Sprockets
no one knows what you just talked about.
Anyway, Mike Myers, he plays like a...
I'm way too young for that.
Okay. It's like Autobahn in The Big Lebowski.
Oh sorry.
Gosh. Okay. Anyway, it's literally copied.
Yes.
There's nothing new.
It's tropes.
Yes. Yeah. It's just tropes. And by the way, like as a value, copying, as a Christian value, copying is everything. Like that's literally what we're supposed to do. Like
Paul be more like Christ.
Be an imitator of me as I am an imitator of Christ. Right. Like the idea that like you don't copy what goes before you is repulsive, actually, as an idea. How are you going to learn karate? How are you going to learn how to write? How are you going to, how are you going to learn a worldview?
To cook,
like
everything.
There's no true innovators other than God.
Yeah, I mean, like Tesla wasn't the first, electric vehicle. I mean, every vehicle like builds. It's just stupid. It's just so lame. Yeah.
Well, I wish you had opinions.
Yeah.
Evan, you know me a long time. Sarah, know me maybe a little bit longer, and I've long been accused of being unfeeling, heartless.
That was just a joke. He does have a heart.
Very few emotions ever expressed, but times when people have seen me express emotions, and this is just maybe being a little film nerdy, are especially in movies where there's time lost with family, where you could have spent years, sometimes decades.
If you want to see Oscar lose it, go to the section in Interstellar where he's realizing that he's lost all that time.
No spoilers, haven't seen it yet.
Oh my gosh, get with it.
And what's really interesting is that the person who shot this commercial was the person who was a cinematographer for Interstellar. So clearly he was probably taking some cues from Christopher Nolan's direction, from just the power, not just in Interstellar, but also in Inception, another movie made by Christopher Nolan, shot by this man, with a Hans Zimmer soundtrack. But there's this just, I think, deep, primitive, innate, built-in emotional power to the parent-child dynamic that is maybe unparalleled in human experience, that you could have been there, that you could have done, that you could have experienced, and then somehow it was taken from you. And so that, I think that's what this ad is really hitting on. And having not seen it, now I'm looking forward to going to check it out. As big a fan as I am of Interstellar, Inception, and those kinds of just affecting narratives.
We're going to get the whole studio to cry by the end of this podcast. This is great.
What the
we'll put on Gladiator for Evan. See, I know everyone's weak spots now.
I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go see Gladiator 2. Yeah.
No.
I love Denzel, so I'm probably going to watch it just because of Denzel.
I've read the people reviews, and it's not
I
good.
meant the original. Isn't that one of your, like, it'll get you choked up?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone should cry at the end of Gladiator and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Like, if you don't, you have no soul.
In this life or the next.
Yes. Coca-Cola, that ad is actually a 10-year-old ad, but it went viral like in January, like on churchpop.com, for example, the most pro-life Coca-Cola commercial you'll ever see. It talks, it's a woman who says she's pregnant, and it's that Coca-Cola life, whatever. I mean, we all know from RFK that we shouldn't be drinking Coke, but that aside.
What about Diet Coke every day?
No more. You haven't been around a while.
Oh.
What? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Many changes in the studio.
When we talk about MAHA, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Well, we'll be interested to follow Jaguar's progress. I think it's going to flop big time. Too many carbs out there, and too much competition. So,
they're not trying to be like them. They're copying nothing.
Copy nothing.
Well.
They don't even want to.
But now we can say that when we just want to make Evan like roll his eyes. This is great.
I will roll my eyes. Okay. In terms of sort of things that we're maybe like thankful for, and this is a little bit partisan. Perhaps,
a little bit partisan.
But this was a short article that was in the Axios the other day. It's called "The Resistance Goes Quiet." So y'all might remember in 2016 there were women's marches and lots of opposition to Trump, and there was obviously like deep state opposition where they spied on his campaign. Yes, Leslie, they spied on my campaign. That's a 60 Minutes clip. Anyway, yes, they spied on his campaign, and they're. Anyway, he faced a lot of difficulties in that term, but now the resistance seems to be sort of already no energy. It's not going anywhere. So they're kind of planning another march against Trump in January. I don't know if they're actually. I think they're not calling it a women's march anymore because they don't want to limit it. Now we don't know what a woman is. A lot has changed since 2016. It's incredible, but no, I think they're basically like we need everyone we can get because it's looking like it was 1 million. I mean, the women's march was like 1 million people or something. It was a pretty big deal.
What color will the hats be for this resistance?
I don't know. I don't know if they'll have.
I didn't know where that hat talk was going. Sorry,
but they're basically it is looking like they're worried this thing is going to flame out big time because there's just not the energy there. Now there are some, he's not going to get every pick he wants. There's some maneuvering behind the scenes with the Senate and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, there doesn't seem to be the cultural appetite to hate Trump. I think a lot has changed. There was another article related to this in Politico, where they talked to 4 Politico writers about sort of what's going on. And the headline from the article was, 8 years later, he's still standing, he is stronger than ever, and we're all exhausted. And I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. So now, again, I'm not necessarily saying that means Trump is a great guy or his administration will be wonderful. A couple of other related articles, though. CBS News poll finds Trump starts on positive note. I think 59% of people approve of his transition. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
That's if only 50% of people voted for him, to have 9% of people approve, that's a good thing. There was a related poll. 57% approve of his program to start deporting all immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally. 57-43 we're basically a 50-50 country. Mm-hmm. That's a landslide. Mm-hmm. You can't get 60% of the people to agree the sky is blue in America anymore. So he is winning like big time, and so I happen to think that his policies are quite good. I think they'll be good for people. I think we are in desperate need of massive reform. At every level of our government. I think he has the tools with the Supreme Court rulings he got in the last couple of years, Chevron deference and the EPA West Virginia decision. And related to this is DOGE, which I didn't have an article for, but Elon and Vivek, who are looking at, I think, Argentina and El Salvador as models of what can be done, how you can slash government, bring about dramatic changes, how you can reduce crime, how you can change the whole attitude, and the people will reward you for it. I think the left wants us to believe that if Trump goes through with his plan, he will face huge amounts of unpopularity. He could never pass on this legacy. MAGA will die in the water. People won't put up with, whatever it is, deportations. They won't deal with cutting in the Department of Education, etc. People will be irate. And I think that what Argentina and El Salvador have shown is actually the opposite is true. Mm-hmm. If you are bold, you take decisive action, and you are for the people, you will be rewarded with unprecedented, that might be too high a goal, but with popularity, and I think the people will be on your side. So I think he's in the catbird seat. I think he.
What in the world does that mean?
He's
never heard that phrase.
He's in pole position. Another metaphor. He's that's a racing metaphor.
I don't know either.
The catbird seat.
He's in control.
I mean, I can use context clues, but I'm just like, how old are you?
Actually, I don't know what the catbird seat means. I just know that's where you want to be.
Okay.
I think
or pole position.
Yeah, or pole position. Yeah.
That sounds naughty by the look on y'all's faces. I don't know what it means.
No, it's in auto racing. It means you won the speed lap the day before. So
all of y'all's faces looked like it was
so out of the whole crowd of cars, you get to start the race up front.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, they have these things in car races. They don't just give you the front position because you're nice. You had to spend the previous day getting the fastest lap on your own.
Okay.
So that's how you get pole position. Plus, it was a great arcade game. I played so much pole position at Johnny's Pizza when I was a kid. Anyway, just kind of the whole transition going well, and the best effort, the best opportunity in years to slash government. And I did make a list. Hang on. And I know, Sarah, you want to chime in on this as well. But I did make a list of the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not really official, but it does have Congress people involved. It has Marjorie Taylor Greene is on it from the House, and the female Joni Ernst, senator from Iowa, has gotten involved. So there are actual lawmakers in place who are a part of DOGE and are going to be going through the federal budget and the government, and they're going to be saying, cut, 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 cut. It's going to be glorious and
everything
wonderful.
Must go. Fire
Everything
sale.
must go. And then what they can do is, because this is the kind of poison pill of the administrative state. The administrative state it's not constitutional. It shouldn't even exist, but it's essentially a fourth branch of government. So the 450 departments and administrations we have in the federal government, they're going to be looking at all those. Those are all under the executive branch. So they don't exist.
Like EPA, that kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah.
So they can just be they can make recommendations to the president, and the president can say, "Oop," because he has the executive branch.
He's the head of the executive
Yeah.
branch.
So the
I don't think I realized that. That's pretty cool.
There is a bringing back of the very notion that the president is the head of the military. What's the phrase for that?
Commander-in-Chief.
Commander-in-Chief. He is the chief magistrate. So he is over the Justice Department. He is over the Attorney General, which is what Watergate tried to subvert. Right. So Watergate was all about putting no man is above the law, putting the Attorney General over the presidency, and that's essentially what we've lived with for the last 50 years. There is now going to be an effort to overtake again, the Department of Justice as the president is the chief magistrate and he's essentially the CEO. he runs the deal. So they're going. That's actually what Project 2025 is about. It's basically a study of the executive branch and how it has been eroded and how it's a reclamation of the executive power, so that when someone says we should cut this, we should cut that, he can say, okay, done.
Yeah,
and he's going to do it. So I think it's fascinating, but there are some like juicy possible cuts.
Yes.
That when I go to sleep at night, I think, please cut that. Please cut that. Just a couple. I would mention, for example, this may not be related to DOGE, but I think it is. No transgender in the military.
Oh, wow.
That's gone on day one. That's been said. NPR, which has 100% Democrats, on its staff and gets millions and millions of dollars.
So it's not that they won't exist anymore, but they won't be government funded.
They can exist the same way the rest of the media exists, right? The same way
this
we
podcast exists.
Yeah.
From donors like you.
Yes.
theologybythepint.org/give.
I need to do the Biden thing and look right in the camera. There are no red states. Yes. There are no. Okay, let me stop.
So NPR, the Department of Education, the department, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if he's confirmed as head of HHS, that is a $2 trillion department. Now, granted, a lot of that is Medicare and Medicaid, but $2 trillion. The Department of Education is $250 billion with a B dollars. Billion. Now, that's like a lot of Pell Grants and stuff.
Yeah.
So in theory, student loans are paid back, but still, it's just outrageous the amount of money that we spend on this stuff. And you had one you wanted to highlight could get cut.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
I just read that this morning.
Yeah. Why am I funding Planned Parenthood?
Yeah.
I never voted for that.
And, the people on the other side are upset because they're saying now there won't be any, healthcare, reproductive healthcare, which is so silly. There's so many places to get reproductive healthcare. When I say reproductive healthcare, I mean things like birth control, testing, ultrasounds, STD testing, STI testing. Huh?
Your doctor.
Yeah, your doctor can do that. All of the, pregnancy center clinics can do those things. So, yeah, there's lots of places to go.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
And maybe you can get condoms in school still until RFK Jr. has his way. I don't know. But
anyway, I think those are all positive things. Sorry, that was kind of a rant. But I think, so the resistance is fraying. People are behind Trump. And I think he's has some really good opportunities to make actual reform to the federal government, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Well, to pull back a little bit in scope and to affirm what is your excitement on these cuts, if you look at Romans 13 and you just do a study of what is government for? Well, first of all, like the governors are there and they're instituted by God. And as long as the laws themselves are just and righteous, the government, in my perspective, and I think it's a biblical perspective, is really only there to do two things: to promote virtue, so goodness through the law by abiding, by being law abiding. Sorry, excuse me. And then to punish evil. And that's kind of it. Like the government is not supposed to educate your children. The government is not supposed to raise your children. The government isn't supposed to get in between you and your meal. The government isn't supposed to provide for you. It is supposed to encourage you to follow the law by the threat of punishing evildoers. And that's it.
Yeah.
So that we've gotten away so bloated in all of the different areas that you need government to give you permission. Like you can hardly do anything without the government's permission. You can't drive, you can't hunt, you can't fish, you can't marry, you can't cross a border. And some of those I think are more sort of rightfully applied, or maybe like rightfully instituted, but there's just so much bloat that really I think could keep money in pockets of taxpayers when you realize you don't need big daddy government to do everything for you or to tell you what to do or explain to you how it is that you're going to, especially pass it on to your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, the hand wringing, Elon Musk, he cut 80% of Twitter. And it's like,
and look how that went.
Better than ever.
Better than ever. It is setting all kinds of records for usage, and and anyway, so it's like, do they hear themselves? Yeah. So I agree that the government should have very limited functions, and I think we do face a multi-decade reform project here of really like, because like if you just look at schools and education, it's not, we can't just cut the Department of Education. Like we need a comprehensive revolution about how we think about educating children. Like the fact is public schools fail because the families are failures, you know, because there aren't moms and dads around. And so we send children off, you know, and we make the parent, you know, the teachers do an impossible task. Like the teachers can't civilize, that sounds terrible, but you know, it can't discipline the child and teach at the same time. It's kind of one or the other.
No, I think civilize is a correct term.
I was literally just going to say, I think that's a great word.
The origins of education were to promote virtue.
That's yes.
It's only recently that it's all about making good comrades.
Yeah, take it back.
I was literally going to say almost that exact same thing.
Yeah, and you know,
smart,
it's all about skill development. No, schools, rightly done, are like their number one goal is to cultivate virtue.
A podcast, like a pundit that I was listening to recently was quoting some of the like original mission statements from Harvard and some of these other schools. And, you know, like to cultivate men that love the Lord. I mean, this kind of thing, you know, that are men of virtue and character and that kind of thing. And now, I mean, my son goes to a local college where he's learning about the 62 genders or whatever. Like, we've fallen quite a ways. But yeah.
One other thought, just kind of take it back to where you started briefly about the like resistance to Trumpism, like fizzling out because people are just tired. Part of my reaction is one of compassion, similar to Oscar's point earlier about the 4B movement. Is I'm not anti-political involvement. I think informed political involvement is a way that we can love our neighbor, but I do think politics can be idolized, and certainly if you are not a believer, you're going to look for a God somewhere. So part of my white pill on all this is my hope is that some of these people that have become disillusioned with politics and have exhausted themselves, given everything to that, the Lord might use that to turn some of those people back to himself.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of the things that, that Trump actually wants to do are things that the left used to be in favor of. You know, it's a lot of the hippy dippy stuff, which we'll talk about here in a minute, with like to make America healthy again, you know, led by a Democrat. You know, the end of war, you know, like not foreign wars, endless foreign wars. I mean, isn't that what the left used to be about? I mean, they hated Bush for all the wars. And anyway, it's just, I think maybe if like the general speaking, the kind of political and social left sort of comes home, like you could actually see like a continuation of 60-65% agreement about the things
they're going to get what they want, even if they're mad about it while it's happening.
Well, that's exactly what Trump said, and they misquoted him. He said, "I'm going to protect women even if they don't like it."
Yeah.
And then the left just the media went in an uproar about it. It's like, see, there he goes again. You know, give it. You know, it's like he said he's going to protect you. You know,
yeah,
he's going to protect.
I don't need protection.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna shave my head and be an island anyway.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell us.
An ugly island.
Sarah,
an ugly island.
Sarah's the most excited about Make America Healthy.
I'm so excited. Some of our listeners know that I've recently gotten pretty crunchy, falling down the rabbit hole of all kinds of things, such that you will notice if you watch on YouTube and you've seen my Diet Coke cup, it's no longer here. I'm like a month in to no Diet Coke. And that wasn't the first thing, but in our family, we're off of seed oils. We're eating organically. We're also doing a gluten-free thing, but that's not because it's bad for everybody. Trying to eat a lot of locally sourced, you know, farmed meats, that kind of thing. Eating tons of butter because it's way better for you than all the nasty seed oils. So I am really excited about the RFK Jr. thing. I know that he has some crazy thoughts, and I don't know that I agree with him about everything. But that's okay, because what's happening is they're giving him space to actually do studies on the things that he has made claims about for years. So it's like, well, if he says, you know, vaccinations cause autism, finally someone's saying, okay, go run those studies and find out if that's actually true. But I'm not here to talk about the vaccines and autism. I'm talking about things like...
Can I just speak to the vaccine thing real quick?
Yeah.
So just like part of my whole issue with the pushback against RFK is he's essentially being slandered, like being called things like anti-vax. And my understanding of his position, he's not anti-vax as much as he is anti-unhealthy vax.
Or doing all of them at once kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
or the fact that none of them, I'm reading his book right now, Vax on Vax, which came out in 2022, where the main point is we do not have tests on any of these vaccines.
Yeah.
They have not been texted with the gold standard of, you know, double blind placebos, et cetera. So, you know,
Well, the article that I have, it says, "Can RFK Jr. make America's diet healthy again?" I will say, in part of this getting crunchy thing, I didn't realize, and I'm 48. I didn't realize until this last year how much corruption there is in like big food, big pharma, big agriculture. I mean, I'm friends with Evan, so I knew there was some, but I didn't realize how deep it goes. I didn't realize things like up until really the rise of birth control, medicine in America was all acute. You know, if you have an infection, you take an antibiotic. If you have something wrong with you, you take something that will cure that in the next like 2 weeks or something. But when birth control came on the scene, now you had a medicine that could be given to women for months, years, maybe almost a lifetime. And then, of course, everyone gets dollar signs in their eyes and realizes, oh, we could do that with so many other things. And we can have the standard of care and what we teach doctors. You realize doctors get almost no teaching on nutrition, but they get a lot of teaching about how to look for what the prognosis could be that would require medicine. Anyway, so all of that kind of stuff I've sort of had my eyes open to recently. But then I also just very recently, for the first time ever, thought to myself, there are things about our health that we can actually heal on our own without going to the doctor. I'm just such a like kid of the 80s that was like, well, if you're sick, you go to the doctor. And I have some autoimmune stuff. And when it kicks up, I go to the doctor and then I get my pills and then it goes away and then we rinse, repeat. But I started going down this rabbit trail and thought, what if I could actually change my diet? And I'm here to tell you that I have done it. I've healed myself. No, the Lord has healed me, but through the things that he gave us for like all of time, right? Like good food and good healthy habits. So that's why I'm excited about this. This is a couple, snippets from this. It says, RFK Jr. has set his sights on changing how Americans eat and drink, from the dyes and Fruit Loops, which, by the way, are banned in most other countries, to seed oils and chicken nuggets. Kennedy, who is President-elect Trump's choice to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, has long spoken out against ingredients that he says hurt Americans' health. He goes on to say, what he's suggesting is taking on the food industry. He gets into a whole thing about raw milk. We're drinking raw milk in our house. I'm telling you, we're so granola. It's great. He's also singled out more controversial health issues, including fluoride in drinking water. I don't know what I think about that yet, which he says should be banned altogether. Raw milk. And there was another spot in here I wanted to say something about.
And right on cue, the FDA said today they were confiscating a bunch of raw milk somewhere because it had bird flu in it.
Oh, oops. Well,
so the Empire Strikes Back. You know, right when raw milk hits its peak popularity, they're like, "Oh no, we're going to take." Well, that was a major turning point with the Amish vote. There was a raid on an Amish farm, and it made big news where they just went in and all this butter and like raw milk and something at this Amish farm, they just threw it all away. Just threw it away. Said, "Oh no, you can't sell that here." It tested negative for something or something. I don't know, but
one of the things that I'm really excited about that he's hopefully going to do is there are a bunch of different poisons that we use as pesticides on everything that we farm in America. The biggest one being glyphosate, so that's Roundup. It's banned in most other countries, and it's banned in most other countries because it is really, really poisonous, and you just don't have a choice. Like you don't have a choice that the food you eat unless you go buy the expensive organic, and then you have to look them in the eye and be like, is this really organic? And feel their pulse while they're talking to you. I mean, it's like really hard to find stuff that hasn't been sprayed with this poison, but it's everywhere. I mean, it's in all this stuff. And then of course the cows are eating the stuff. That's on and on it goes.
And it's the soil. Nicole Shanahan, his running mate, talks a lot about this, but she's really big into soil, and some of the people she's
we're killing our soil.
We're killing our soil. It's depleted, which is why if you eat an orange today, you need to eat like 4 of them to equate the nutritional value of an orange 50 years ago. There's just nothing in it because there's nothing in the soil anymore. Like we're not replenishing the soil. We're not letting it have a bacterial life. And I know nothing about this, but
if he has his way and he starts to expose the corruption in big agriculture and like the companies that have their hands in all of the money of it, if that happens, we'll start to see a lot more space for regenerative farming,
right?
Which is.
Have you started to watch Clarkson's Farm yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Because of the podcast.
Are you to the 3rd season yet?
Oh gosh, no.
Oh, okay.
I don't have that much time on I have a job.
There are only 8 episodes per season, I think. But have y'all seen that? I don't know if I'm okay. you need to listen to our podcast. And anyway, Clarkson's Farm. It's about Jeremy Clarkson. He owns a farm in England. It's a reality show.
In the Cotswolds.
In the Cotswolds, and he learns about farming. But the government is clearly the bad guy on the farm. But the third season, he talks a lot about regenerative farming and growing multiple crops in the same field, and how one crop will help with the soil growth of the other. But one of the main basic economic takeaways, it's very simple, which is that because he has a fun competition with Caleb, his young farmer who like does all the actual farming work.
He's like my favorite right now.
He's so funny. Yeah, you'll love him. But they kind of get into a competition where Jeremy Clarkson says, I'm going to go do wild farming, where I'm going to like go harvest the blackberries that grow on the farm and sell them in my market and see if I can make as much money as you who are doing the big, the big crops, right? The 100 acres at a time or whatever. And the basic economics is such that when you pay for the fertilizer, which you have to pay for to get the NGO, the government, the genetically
GMO?
modified food to grow, because the soil's depleted, to get the crop that you need to make money.
Yeah.
Like he actually made more money just harvesting stuff that was growing naturally on the farm than putting the 500 acres to use with the genetically modified food and all the fertilizer, because this thing in Ukraine made fertilizer costs go way up.
Yep.
Because fertilizer is basically a natural gas in pellet form. So
but this goes to the white pill that I would say is not just that we're going to be healthier, which is awesome, and I think we will see a decrease if he gets his way in all kinds of autoimmune diseases and cancers and reproductive. I mean, all of the stuff that has to do with our women's hormone. I mean, men and women are hormones. Anyway, that's all wonderful. But the white pill of it for me is that it's just getting back to the thing that God has given us already for all of time. He gave us the sun. Like I've been learning about the amazing effects of the sun. So I've been sitting in the sun for half an hour every day, looking like a real freak in my little yard. But because the sun is good for mitochondrial health. Who knew that? The Lord did. Like he gave us the sun. He gave us the ground to walk on. He gave us all of these beautiful things like cows that make milk from which you get butter. Butter may be my favorite thing in the whole world. That's what I'm thankful for this Thanksgiving. But all of these things are things that God knew would be good for us, gave them to us, good gifts from him, regardless of whether we believe in him or not. There's that common grace. And so we're actually getting back to recognizing, so we need to eat all the foods that he gave us, the way that he gave them to us. And I'm here for it. I love it.
He thinks he can do it in 2 years.
Well, some of this stuff is quick. I mean, if he says, stop using glyphosate, production will take a slight downward turn because people are relying on that.
And again, the mechanism by which the administrative state was brought into formation, which is unconstitutional, which is that it happened quickly without sufficient legislation and such, it can be undone that quickly. So that's kind of the good news, bad news kind of thing. So
interesting. Because
now that the Supreme Court has ruled with the EPA and the Chevron deference case, those two big cases the last couple of years, those are the tools that the conservative movement needed to go gut the administrative state. Yeah. Without that, they couldn't have done it. But now the Supreme Court is going to say, "Yep, that's you can kill that." So, I think that's good.
So, a couple of positives. So I don't know enough to say whether or not I agree with RFK on everything, but I feel pretty confident that I don't, and that he's probably not right on everything. But to me, the two positives that could come from this is one, if he's even moderately successful, the emphasis on preventative health, I think, is like desperately needed. That all this talk about how do we lower healthcare costs is like, well, a lot of that is preventative health, like keep people from having to go to the doctor, right, in the first place. So if he's even moderately successful, then I'm excited about that. And then number two, even if he's wrong on some of these things, I think the being allowed to question some of these assumptions is a win. So the analogy comes to my mind. I was just listening to a podcast on my way here about Darwinism, where apparently, first of all, Darwin, he was like, he admitted that you could look at the evidence and interpret them in a way that went against his thoughts. And he was like, we should evaluate both, which if you criticize Darwinism or question Darwinism at all in like the secular scientific world, like that's anathema. Yeah. Right. But the reality is, and this podcast was like just going through all this, like when you look at the actual like fossil evidence and all these sorts of things, there's all these things that do not align with the Darwinist theory, but you can't say that yet.
Yeah.
Now the hope is we will, like when the scientists are actually like swallow their pride and be like, yeah, actually the evidence doesn't support what we've been teaching you for decades, then things will start to change. And that would be my hope with RFK, is just at least being allowed to question some of these things and put some of these things to the test, which maybe they have been already, but I'm skeptical.
Well, and he's not acting alone. I mean, he's got a lot of people in his orbit, like two of the names. Actually, I just learned about a few months ago, Callie and Casey Means. They're a brother-sister duo. He used to be a lobbyist. She used to be a doctor. And they sort of, I hate saying wake up because that sounds like conspiracy theories. Where like, now I really believe the earth is flat. But yeah, they began to see the corruption that was going on. And so, but they have all of this knowledge from their former industries that they bring to the table. So it's not just RFK up there with his, scepter saying like fluoride is bad. And everyone's like, well, it must be bad. I mean, there are a lot of people in the orbit that are going to help run the appropriate studies and bring the science to bear. So I'm excited. Real science.
Indeed. Okay, Mace, where can people find you?
thejourneyhouston.org.
Cool. Oscar, people cannot find you anywhere.
I've been thinking about returning to social media.
Wow.
Perhaps in a professional sense, not exactly in a personal sense, but we'll see.
I got you. Okay.
More to come.
Well, let us know, and then we'll get the word out for you.
We'll get the word out.
Yeah.
You can find me at any of our events. And if you're like, man, I would love to come to an event, how can I know when you're going to have your next one and what it'll be about? That's also where you can find on theologybythepint.org. Theologybythepint.org has all the stuff about our events. It also has the leadership page, so you can get to know me and Evan and all the other people that are on leadership. And you can leave a comment for us or tell us what you like or don't like. It's great.
And the next event is an Ask Us Anything, right?
Yeah, December 10th. This is going to be really fun. I'm actually going to be on the panel first time in like 6 years. Evan will be moderating part of it. Austin Freeman will be moderating the other half. And you can ask any question you want to the panel. So it's going to be juicy.
Well, you can
fun.
ask, but that doesn't mean the
Doesn't mean it's gonna
moderator will throw it to the, I'll use.
We'll see if they can do as well as I do. I don't know.
Probably not. Well, yeah, come to that event. And I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. But until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.